Hey friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and as you saw in the thumbnail, we've got a TwoSun today. Oh, I should have cleaned the blade a little bit better, but there you go. The TS321. It's a thumb stud knife. That's the deployment method. I like that. I'm a big fan of thumb stud deployment. We've got I'm going to call it a full flat grind. It's not full all the way at the back here, but most of it's a full flat grind. We've got G10 handle scales made to try to look a bit like an integral. Kind of cool. And I'm kind of liking this for $43.99. That's before the discount. No wonder they first batch sold out from White Mountain Knives right away. And hopefully they're going to get them back because this is in one of the late numbers, 321. So yeah, should be back soon. It's not soon enough or late enough to have the model number on the knife, but it's a pretty cool night morning design, budget knife. Take off your 10% from White Mountain Knives with our coupon code CCE, and you're looking at under 40 American shekels for this thing. Are you interested? Stick around, we're going to take a good close look at it. Let's begin with our size comparison with the Ontario Rat, one that we like to use. Because I'm using this as a size comparison, it doesn't mean that I'm a huge fan of the Rat one. I like it, but to me it's not really a special knife. It's just a very common knife that a lot of people have or at least know about, and so I use it for the size comparison. I hope I didn't offend too many of you. Line up the pivot pins. It's a little bit smaller, not an awful lot smaller, and what I like to show quite often is the length of the cutting edge. Yeah, a little bit less, but less than a 1/4 inch less, and it's also got a forward choil, so that's pretty good. Let's take a look at that blade first. We've got that satin finish on it, the vertical lines on the satin finish, and yeah, I left my fingerprints all over that. First, they did a black wash finish. That's why you've got black wash on the flats and on the spine here. It got a little bit of the thumb riser, and then we've got a long clip point. We've got sort of a stubby belly. The angle here with the tip is, about 75 degrees of an angle, so it's not a great piercing kind of knife. But we've got a nice belly and a straight section here. It's pretty great for slicing. That belly right there really does help it to slice really well. Cutting's pretty good. It's just not much of a piercer. We've got badging on the blade, Night Morning's logo right there, and then 14C28N. Good budget steel that I'm a big fan of. And on this side, TwoSun right there. We've got a great big forward choil, big enough to actually use. You know how often I complain about forward choils on knives not being big enough to be useful? My finger goes in there and there's room to spare. And for those of you who know my hand size, yeah, it's just barely into the extra large range. Usually have to buy extra large men's gloves. Sometimes a large fits depending on the manufacturer. But we've got that right there, and thumb studs for deployment. We've got these thumb studs behaving as the stop for the open position. We do have a stop pin here to hold the blade for closing, but for opening, the thumb studs are that. And they've got that beehive shape to them. Quite useful for deploying. They actually stick out a little bit further. Well, about where the widest point of the handle is how far they are. But the knife gets a little more narrow here, so they stick proud, and they just work really well for blade deployment. Even on the left-hand side, it just works really well to get that blade out there. So I'm a big fan of those thumb studs. Now you can see the detent hole when the knife is open. I don't like seeing that kind of thing. I think that's just a very minor miss. It was probably not meant to be visible. That was probably meant to be hidden there. You see just a little bit of the line where the detent ball wears on there. But with that black finish, it's not super visible, so I'm not upset about that, not really. We've got jimping at the thumb riser and a little bit of a chamfer all over the place. The jimping there is not super aggressive, but it's aggressive enough to be helpful, so quite good. I like that. And we've got nice ceramic ball bearings in here. I did have this blade, or the pivot pin, come loose. Let me see. Yeah, it's loose enough for me just to undo it right now, just like that. So the typical TwoSun thing about the screws coming loose easily, I like to use Vibratite VC3 instead of a thread locker. It's well, it's technically a thread locker, but it's a totally different kind of thread locker than Loctite or something. And I use that to hold them closed. When it's snugged up with my thumb like that, yeah, it's tight enough that there's no blade play side to side. Lockup is very nice. I like how far it's engaged, and it's got loads of room to come over. Alignment right down the middle, which I'm quite fond of, and very comfortable. It's not drop shutty, but you know, it's not rough at all. It's nice and smooth, so I'm a big fan of that. Lock release, we've got a wedge kind of on there, or a chamfer on there, I should say, and there's some jimping across the top. Very easy for your thumb to engage and grab it and pull it either right-handed or left-handed. It's easy to disengage that lock, so I'm happy with that. We've got inset liners that are skeletonized. I haven't taken it apart yet, other than taking that screw off, so we'll see exactly how they look. And we've got a body construction that is a little bit unique. Of course, we've got the pivot pin there. We've got a body pin there that goes all the way through. And we've got a pin here that comes through to the back screw for the thumb stud, and then the front thumb stud pocket clip. I used to do that an awful lot on every single video. Now it's only every once in a while. So yeah, body pin at the back, and then the pocket clip screw there. Those are nice, high-quality screws that TwoSun uses. Even though they're button screws, there is enough room in there for it works just fine. And the other body screw we have is, well, it's not really a body screw. It's a G10 screw. This one goes to the liner on that side. This one goes to the liner on that side. It doesn't go all the way through, of course, because the blade would be in the way. So that's how they made it. The rest of the handle here, it's got a really cool 3D milling on it. We've got a line that comes across here. So this peak here, and from the end of the first choil here, we've got a line there, and then it's nicely rounded, and then it comes off on an angle, goes thinner, and then it comes a little bit thicker at the back. And here it just keeps getting thinner all the way to the front. So it's got a really cool 3D kind of shape to it right there. So the thickest spot is right where those screws are. We've got a big lanyard hole at the back there, chamfering on it, so that it's not going to catch your paracord and fray your paracord on there. We've got pieces of G10 in here. They're not glued together. Like the G10, there's a black G10 standing out, and then there's a red liner glued to it. But there's a seam right down the middle of that red line. I talked a little bit about the pocket clip. It is the standard pocket clip that TwoSun uses on their budget knives, with that flat top, climbs over every time, and it goes in. There's extra space here. They could have made it a little bit smaller, but that holds just fine. I'm not a big fan of that pocket clip, but it's better than a lot of pocket clips, so I'm not going to complain too much about it. That's the construction of it. I'm going to turn off the camera, take it apart, and then I'll show you how it's built. Here you can see the high quality screws, really well made. It's one of the best things TwoSun does. Even on their budget knives, they've got really high quality screws, and they're all T8 size. A little bit of skeletonizing right there, and then there's those alignment pins there to hold it together. You see the D-shape hole for the screw there. And of course, I didn't mention anything about the red inset, for the sort of pivot collar. And we've got dual row ceramic detent balls. Not bad for a knife that's going to cost you under 40 bucks to get. So that explains part of the smooth action. We've got a little bit of a ramp there for the detent for closing it, which is quite nice. Happy about that. Some more skeletonizing in here. And got to get these pins back in place. This one here is just an alignment pin, and that's the stop pin for closing it. And you get your D-shaped pivot pin. Very simple, good design that ends up looking, like I said, like an integral. I'm going to wipe it down, put it back together, and we're going to talk about all the dimensions, sizes, and all that stuff. The weight of this thing, 124 grams, 4.35 ounces, so not very heavy. That's nice. Sharpness from the factory, it scored 100 bests. That's very good. The cutting edge length is 78 millimeters, 3.07 inches. Blade length, tip to the closest spot on the handle, 86.5 millimeters, 3.41 inches. The thickness of the blade, 3.65 millimeters, 0.1435 of an inch. So, and the blade depth, it's widest right here, 30.2 millimeters, 1.19 inches. How thin is it behind the grind? Part of the reason why it got such a good score on the sharpness, 0.29 millimeters. That's 11.5 thousandths of an inch thin behind the edge. It's not because of the sharpening that it got such a good sharpening score. I mean the grind angles, because the grind angles, this side's got an average of 16 degrees. This side's got an average of 18.1 degrees. But oh, this side's the better side. It started at 16.8 degrees, went to about 17.6, 16.3, ended at 13.2. This one started at 21.3 degrees, went to about 19.1, 18.7 at the peak of this belly, and ended at 13.1. That's 8.2 degrees of variability along the length of this knife. The sharpening from factories really is getting to me. It's like it's getting worse than it used to be. Sure, they make the edge sharp, but they do a terrible job sharpening the knife, as in the grind angles that they put everything on. That said, I really like TwoSun, and I quite like this knife. I'm just disgusted by the sharpening. More measurements. The handle length, 117.3 millimeters, 4.62 inches. The grip area, this part's about 9 centimeters, 3.5 inches, not millimeters. Up here, it's more like 11.2 centimeters or 4.4 inches. So lots of room for a big hand to hold this thing. The thickness of the handle, like I said, it's thickest right down that line where this bigger screw is. 14.9 millimeters, 0.586 of an inch, and it's under half an inch at the most narrow spots. The handle depth is widest right here, I think. Yeah, right there, it's the widest point. 26.8 millimeters, 1.055 inches. When the knife is closed, the widest point's right there. That is 33.5 millimeters, 1.32 inches. When it's deployed, the total length of this thing is 225 millimeters, 8.86 inches. Yeah. Oh, forgot to mention the balance point before. The balance point's right there. That's not bad. I'd like it to be just a tiny bit more here, but no, not bad at all. What are my final thoughts about this thing? I'm quite a fan. What would I change? I would make this belly a little less bulbous. I'd have it coming back a little bit more. So remove some of the steel right here on this edge. That would turn it into a good piercer as well. It would make it a little bit less of a slicer with this belly here, but it would still be a good slicer and cutter, and then it would also be a good piercer. Yeah. With this thing, you've got a pretty good grip, and if you do a reverse pull grip, you can do some piercing really well with your thumb back here, being sure that your hand's not going to slide over that cutting edge. A lot of different grips on this knife that are very comfortable, and that's a good thing. What else is good on this thing? Lockup is solid, and there's lots of room for that thing to wear over the life of the knife. Good action. The ball bearings, really nice. The blade just comes flying out when you ask it to. For the price, the action's quite nice indeed. And it's not D2. Yay! It's not D2. That's quite nice. Right now in 2022, with all that's going on around the world, it's getting hard to find 14C28N. So if you find a knife with it, you know, at a good price, you should jump at it. It's getting hard to find Sandvik steel. Of course, it's still easy to get D2 steel because D2's been around for ages and ages. And that's why so many more knives, I think that's a big part of why so many knives are coming out still with D2, even though I'm getting tired of it. What are the cons on this thing, other than what I've already mentioned? The sharpening on this thing, I already mentioned that. The sharpening's just terrible. They did a bad job sharpening it. They got a sharp, you know, on my tester, they got it sharp, but they didn't do a good job sharpening this thing. No left-hand pocket clip. So for the 10% of people that are lefties, it's only got a right-hand pocket clip. So there you go. That's the knife. Do I recommend it? Yeah, if you don't need a, you know, strong piercing knife, this thing's quite cool. It looks nice. It's different than most of the knives out there. Certainly different than other knives in this price category. And very functional. Looks good. Carries well. And it does a good job. Thanks for watching my video. Thank to my Patreon supporters. You guys are the best. And my YouTube membership supporters, you're just as good. I appreciate all the help very, very much. If you want to help support Canadian Cutting Edge, go to patreon.com/CCE or click join right down below this video, right there. If you didn't subscribe, you know, then there's a blue subscribe button too, so you can click that too. But right beside the subscribe button, there's a join button. Follow those links and the instructions, and you too can support Canadian Cutting Edge. And that's good because you get a chance to win a knife every single month, and you get to pick which knife you're going to have. So there you go. Remember, friends, always cut towards your chum.